Now, a new analysis shows that the 6-ton iconic altar stone at the heart of Stonehenge originated from northeastern Scotland rather than southwest Wales.
Scotland was never meant to survive. Not its people, not its bloodlines, and certainly not its ancient DNA. For decades, scientists believed Scotland's genetics followed the same pattern as much of Europe. Wave after wave of invaders sweeping in, mixing, and leaving the original people erased from the record. But modern DNA evidence has shattered that myth. Hidden in peat bogs, coastal graves, and windswept island cemeteries are secrets that defy all expectations. Ice Age hunter-gatherers with dark skin and piercing blue eyes, Bronze Age newcomers who transformed the gene pool, mysterious Picts who vanished from written history but not from the bloodstream, Vikings whose DNA runs stronger in some Scottish islands than in parts of Norway itself. Some of these bloodlines are older than Stonehenge, older even than the Egyptian pyramids, and yet they remain alive today, pulsing through the veins of Highland villages and island fishing communities. Scottish DNA is a story of survival against impossible odds. 12,000 years of genetic history preserved not by accident, but by geography, isolation, and resilience. So why is Scottish DNA the strangest in the world? Let's begin at the very start. 12,000 years ago, Scotland was unrecognizable. The last ice age had only just released its grip, leaving behind a frozen landscape of tundra, scattered forests, and retreating glaciers. Slowly, as the ice sheets melted, humans followed rivers and coastlines north into this new land. These early settlers weren't the pale-skinned Celts we often imagine. Genetic studies and skeletal remains from Mesolithic Britain reveal that these hunter-gatherers had dark or olive-toned skin, striking blue eyes, and often curly hair, a combination that seems almost exotic when compared to modern Scots. Yet this was the standard appearance of post-Ice Age Europeans. They lived by hunting red deer and wild boar, fishing rivers and lochs, and foraging along the coast. Their tools were made of flint and bone, their homes, temporary shelters, built near rivers and estuaries. What is most astonishing is that traces of their DNA still survive today in Scotland's most remote areas. In places like the Western Isles, parts of the Highlands and Orkney, genetic markers link modern families back to those Mesolithic pioneers. While much of Europe's early DNA was drowned out by later migrations, Scotland's mountains and seas acted like vaults, protecting fragments of this first ancestry, locking them away in glens and islands where outsiders rarely ventured. Around 4,500 years ago, Scotland entered a new era. Across Europe, a mysterious new culture was spreading. The Beaker people, named for their distinctive bell-shaped pottery. They carried with them bronze tools, new burial traditions, and perhaps most importantly, cattle-based farming that could sustain larger populations. But their arrival wasn't just cultural, it was genetic. Within only a few centuries, the Beaker migrations transformed Britain's population. Studies show that up to 90% of the island's gene pool was replaced by these newcomers. It wasn't genocide, but a gradual dominance of new families, lineages, and farming settlements that overwhelmed the smaller hunter-gatherer bands. In England, the older DNA almost completely disappeared. But in Scotland, once again, things were different. Geography played its protective role. The Beaker DNA mixed heavily with local groups, but in isolated northern and western pockets, remnants of Mesolithic and Neolithic ancestry endured. Instead of replacement, Scotland preserved a blend, a genetic dual inheritance of the old and the new. This fusion of prehistoric survivors and Bronze Age migrants became the foundation of Scotland's unique genetic landscape, setting the stage for the mysteries to come. By the Iron Age, Scotland had developed a people as fierce as they were enigmatic, the Picts. The Romans called them Picti, the painted ones, for their use of tattoos or body paint in battle. They terrified Roman legions, resisted occupation, and forced emperors to build walls rather than risk deeper conquest. For centuries, the Picts dominated northern Scotland. They left behind carved standing stones etched with strange symbols, but no written language of their own. And then, around the 9th century, they seemed to vanish. Medieval chroniclers wrote of their disappearance as if they had dissolved into the mist. But genetics tells a different story. Modern sequencing of burials from Pictish sites reveals that they were not outsiders at all, but descendants of the same mixture of Mesolithic and Beaker ancestry that defined their neighbors. And far from disappearing, their bloodlines flowed directly into the populations of the Highlands, the Western Isles, and beyond. The Picts were absorbed into Gaelic culture, into Norse-dominated islands, and into the fabric of medieval Scotland. Their names may have vanished from chronicles, but their DNA persists, embedded in the very people of the North. In the late 700s, a new force came crashing into Scotland's shores. Viking longships, sleek and deadly, struck monasteries and villages along the coast. But the Norse weren't just raiders. They settled. In Orkney and Shetland, they established powerful earldoms. On the Hebrides and the western coast, they mingled with Gaelic chiefs. Their cultural imprint is obvious in place names, sagas, and archaeology. But it is DNA that reveals the true depth of their impact. In Shetland, about 44% of modern ancestry is Scandinavian. In Orkney, the figure hovers between 30 and 40%. Remarkably, these percentages reflect not only male Viking warriors, but also women, evidence that Norse settlers came with families or took local partners and merged cultures. Even today, Y chromosome studies show that nearly a third of men in Shetland and a quarter in Orkney carry direct paternal lineage from Norse ancestors. That's a stronger Viking imprint than survives in much of mainland Scandinavia itself. And yet, crucially, Viking DNA in Scotland did not erase the older layers. It blended with them. Archaeological studies of Viking burials in Scotland reveal individuals with local ancestry buried according to Norse custom. A fusion of peoples, a hybrid culture both Celtic and Norse, whose genetic legacy still shapes island and highland families today. The Viking Age gave way to another wave of change, the Normans. These were descendants of Vikings who had settled in northern France, blending Norse and Frankish bloodlines. By the 11th and 12th centuries, Norman knights and families began to influence Scotland. Names like Bruce, Stuart, and Sinclair arrived with continental roots, but quickly wove themselves into Scotland's political and cultural fabric. Norman blood became Scottish blood. It was during this era that the famous clan system took shape. For centuries, people assumed clans were simply giant family trees, each descending from a common ancestor. But DNA reveals a more complex truth. Some clans, like the Campbells, really do trace back to a single patriarch. Others, such as the MacDonalds, were vast social networks. Families, allies, and even unrelated tenants might adopt the clan name for protection, loyalty, or survival. Clan identity was as much about allegiance as it was about genetics. Still, geography mattered. People rarely moved far from their native glens or islands. Over time, this created distinct local genetic signatures, so precise that today, DNA can often pinpoint ancestry to a single valley or even a parish. If Scotland was a fortress for DNA, the modern era scattered those lineages across the world. The highland clearances of the 18th and 19th centuries forced countless families from their ancestral lands. Many emigrated to North America, Australia, and beyond. Others joined the British Empire's colonial ventures, carrying their genetic heritage into new continents. The result? Today, genetic markers unique to Scotland's remote regions appear in surprising places. Hebridean lineages show up among ranching families in Montana. Orkney Viking signatures appear in Nova Scotia. Highland markers echo in New Zealand and Australia. Scotland's DNA became global, yet back home, its genetic fortress endured. In small island communities and mountain villages, ancient combinations survived unchanged, even as their echoes spread worldwide. Most of Europe's ancient ancestries were swallowed by migrations and empires. But Scotland is different. It kept them. Its DNA is a palimpsest, a manuscript written and rewritten over millennia, but never erased. Every invasion added layers, but the old ones survived beneath. This is more than survival. It is genetic immortality, a lineage that endures from the Ice Age to the modern age, DNA that refuses to be forgotten, locked in glens, remembered in clans, whispered across oceans. That is why Scottish DNA isn't just unusual, it is the strangest in the world, a miracle of preservation, a genetic time capsule carrying the memories of 12,000 years, proof that in the Highlands, blood remembers what history forgets. I hope you enjoyed this video. For the sources of all the information in this video, you can check the description. In the end, do like and subscribe to our channel, Medieval Mind, for more videos like this.